Hey guys, Zombies RS5 here. Probably been a while since anybody's created a video on importing models into XSI and creating meshes from them. So what I'm going to do is take this model here. This is a Cylon Culture Center created by Cobalt for the Sins of the Fallen Blood and Chrome mod. So I'm going to take this guy and export it to a format that I can handle in XSI. So I'm going to create a LWO here and spit that bad boy out. Okay. Then I'm going to switch to XSI. I'm going to import my LWO, so my Lightwave object import. So go up to import, point oven, and do the LWO import. And then I'm going to go to that directory where I put it. Modules. Get my culture center. Okay. And the scale, for some reason, it always defaults to 10. That's going to make it 10 times larger than what it originally was. So pop that down to 1. I leave all these other options checked. So I get all the UV maps and the other stuff doesn't really matter. So I'll go ahead and import that. Okay, so I get an object here. And we can see it's kind of small. It's not centered. What I would probably consider on the object the right way. So we'll fix all those things, make it a little bigger. We'll center it up. So first thing, let me go ahead and start by centering. So I'm going to do the transform button right here. I'm going to, you can do the move the center to the vertices or move the center to the bounding box. And you just kind of pick the one that works. So let's try that. We can see that we're a little bit off. So we'll plop that down. Okay. And I've created some custom buttons up here. What I'm doing is freezing all transforms. Uh, you can also do that right here too. So freeze all transforms. So that locks it into this position after you do a rotation, movement, scale, whatever. Okay, so I've got that set up. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it this size for now, and then we'll work through the process. So the next step that I always do when I import a Lightwave object is I go into the material for that, and it's partly with how things are set up. So this guy looks like had an extra one, which is fine. So you just kind of look at it. There's no actual clusters. We'll clean up this object for what we're going to do. Okay, then we want to go in and, like I said, find the material that's being used. So this one has a set material, and it's part of the way when I export an LWO. So this is just part of the cleanup that I perform. You just go in and look at the objects and see what's there. I'm going to use the default Fong material, so I'm going to delete these out. So now you can see it switched to seam material, scene root, and Fong. Uh, so let's go ahead. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce Fong. I don't really know or care. So we'll go in. We've got that set up. Now where I'm using default materials, if I press Alt 7, I can pull up the UV map that was created by Cobalt. So we can see that here. Uh, so the next step I do is I create a second UV map. And just for the initial, I go ahead and create a unique projection. I'll go ahead and show that again. So if I go in here, I just do unique UVs polymesh. So I create my second one using that just to see how things look. So I'll have the primary UV looks like this. The second UV is just your standard unique projection. And this is what I'm going to assign the tangent to. And if everything looks good, I'll just leave it like this. Alright, so the next step is I go in and create my tangent. So I just do this up front so I get it out of the way. Create my second UV map and create my tangent. So let's create that. We can see here that it's pointing at the base UV map. We don't want that. We want to go pick and we'll go into our selection here. We'll go into the UV maps, and I'm going to pick the one I just created. So right here, so we can see that that changed. So now I have several of the key elements that are needed. I've got my two UV maps, and I have my tangent. Okay, so let's go ahead. The next thing that I need to do is, we can see here that this is showing more of the tangent look. So I need to set up my textures. So what I got from Cobalt, which is a good texture, let me go ahead and go to it. But it's not all the pieces that we need. So go to the modules, and I should have my color texture here. Okay, so this is what the texture looked like. It's a nice 1024 by 1024. That won't use a lot of memory in Sins, but we've got to make this thing Sins compatible. So I use GIMP. I'm only going to show GIMP. I don't know Photoshop. The first thing you have to do is create something that will work in the game. So let's decompose this. All right, so now I have a RGBA layer that I can work with. This is how you mess with the actual red, green, blue, and alpha layers in GIMP. So what we want is the alpha layer. So I'll go ahead and hide these. I want to make that all black to start. So if I select the fill, okay, so now the white or grayish areas would show as the team color if I were to put any in here. This particular model has some areas that you could turn into team colors. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that off because this demonstration's more about importing the model into Sins. So we'll go that back. Okay, so now we see that it looks invisible. That's because there's the alpha layer is all black, but the other colored layers are still there. So that's this part here. If I had added any white layers, those would actually show the background color that was in here. So let's go ahead and I want to save this. So I save all of my textures as TGAs to start, and that's because TGAs are not a or a rather they are a lossless type of compression, whereas saving in DDS you do lose some of the details. So I'll save it as a TGA, and then I'm going to use this one as kind of a base to create my data map. So if you look at red, red is used as the specular. Green is used as the light map. Well, this object doesn't really have any lights, so we're going to make that all black. Okay, and then blue is used for reflective. Well, we don't really want too high of a specular. Things get washed out. So again, this is just an easy way to kind of set up a quick model just to see how things look. Again, the reflective, all this white stuff would be highly reflective in the game. I don't really want that, so let's set up just a little bit less. And then we want to recompose that back into an RGBA, which again, because my alpha layer is black, we're not really seeing anything, but that's okay because it's more about the layers that are saved inside this model. So what we want to do is save this. Again, I'm going to use a TGA again, except this is going to be my data map. Save that off. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the original diffuse color map, and we're going to apply the NVIDIA filter to that. So what we want to do is go into my map, and we're going to choose normal map. So this is where the filter gets applied. I just like bumping up because I play on low settings for maps. So here we see we get our generation for that. Now the same thing, we still need to decompose this map to an RGBA, and based on my understanding from Major Stress and others is that we want to copy the red channel to the alpha. So we see here that the red and alpha are now identical, and we're going to recompose this back into standard RGB A TGA. Again, I'm going to use TGA here, and this is going to be my normal map. Okay, going to save this off. Alright, so I'm going to move those out of the way for a minute. Okay, so I don't really want the TGAs. What I use is a tool called AMD Compressinator, and I can do a batch compress of these three files, shoot them all down at once. Okay, and let me now go to the textures for that. I'm going to slide this over here. And what we want to do here is on the model to wire the texture up to this model, you press the number 7. That brings up our scene material. And then all we need to do is simply highlight these three DDS files and drop them into here. Alright, now the next process is, we'll lay this out a little. Okay, so we want to take our normal map and connect it to the ambient. We want to take our color map and connect it to diffuse. And we want to take our data map and connect it to specular. Okay, so, and we can delete out the no icon pick. Okay, so this is all set up now. This thing's all purple here, which isn't quite what we want. Well, based on the SIN's guide for hooking up models, what we want to do is go back to the actual material. Let's open that up. It's going to ask if you want to make a copy. Say no, because we want to keep the scene root. You go into the mode. Instead of trick render tree, you want to say use specific image UV pair, and we're going to choose our color map. Okay, so now we can see that we have our object with the texture created by Kubal and the UV map that's on it. If we press Alt 7 and go back, now we get the color map that we're using. So we can see how things are mapped here. We can still see the tangent UV map I've got. As you can see, it doesn't really affect how it's displayed here. That'll affect more how lighting gets applied in the game. Okay, so the next pieces that we want. We need root points on this. This is a planet module, so all we need is center point, above, and aura. I have scripts for that, so this is one script I have here that creates a root point and also creates a aura and creates a center point and puts them into my model. So I'm going to run this script, and you can see here this is my point, and if I press 8 and bring up here, I now have a root point with the correct above, aura, and center. You can manually create the root points too. I just find the scripts so much easier. If anybody wants to look at these, I'd be more than happy to provide. I'll show some different ones, like when we create some flares. I think MyFist also has some points that work real good. To move a point, all we need to do is click on that point, and you can press V to get the translation, or you can come over and just press the T here. And let's say we want to move this guy up. Let's put it about on 8, and we should be able to put aura then at a -8. So now we have our standard center, above, and right in here. So yeah, that's fine. What we see though is our model is really small, but let's go ahead and export this and make sure everything exports fine. So we want to go to export.xsi. Now I'm using version 3.6. It's up to you, version of XSI that you're using. I'm using 7.5. I find this works well. So I'm going to go ahead and plop this in. So I'm going to call this Planet Module Cylon Orbital Culture Center. Okay, export that. Yeah, you'll get some functions not implemented. That's fine, ignore them. Now I'm in my workspace window. I have just a little bat script here called convert. So I'll go ahead and open that up. Basically all it does is call convert XSI, and it allows me to enter one name. So when you see this, I'll do convert planet module, Cylon, orbital, culture center. And what you can see as the output here is that it's really small, 6.5 basically. I've got my three textures that I wired up. I've got my above, aura, and center, which is good. If I go and look at the actual mesh that was generated, you can see here these values are repeated. You might find if two materials are done, it's because you're not using the scene root. So you kind of need to pay attention to what you're doing with your clusters and your materials. You can see the 3 points that I put in are here as well. So that's all good, but the size is really off. So what you might do to see, well, what's a good size for a culture center is to just base it off the existing sim meshes. So let's take a look. I'm going to look at the orbital culture center for tech. We can see that it's a, wow, good 700. So we got to bump this up quite a bit. So we're currently at 6.5. And so let's say if we want to go up to 700, I don't do math in my head very well. So let's say 700 divided by 6.5. So we want to multiply this by 107 times. So what we would do is now that guy should be pretty big now. And if I move this up here, let's say this is quite a bit bigger, we'll put above at 800 and we'll put aura at negative 800. Okay, so we've got a decent sized object now. Let's add a couple of flares. So I've got another button here for adding flares. This just does the auto numbering because I hate doing that. Basically, if we add a flare, let's say a blink, I've got it set up. What you'll see here is that the letter and numbers don't really matter. It's just to make it unique. So if I add another flare, so I've got two flares now. They're just made unique by this number that I'm adding in. The letter doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead. I'll put in, let's do this. Let's just do 6 of these. And we'll be kind of creative here maybe. So let's put one right there. And we'll drag these. Now theoretically, this thing is symmetrized well, so all we have to do is put a negative value on this one. That'll drop it. Try that one more time. Okay, so we can see it drop down here. If we look close enough, we've got a little highlighted point there, and then we've got these two here, so let's put a negative on that. So now it's a little off, so we'll adjust a little hair here, adjust this in a little bit. And if these are too small, you can also bump these up. Size doesn't really matter on these. Get a little better view of them in our window. Okay, so now I want to move one of these over there. So we'll take the negative off our Z axis. And we'll take the negative off of this one. So now I have flares on each of these points, just to give it a little visibility. We can look at these also in this window. I'll press O. It looks like, yep, good thing I did that. I need to adjust these now because of that model. So let's go in here. So I can select my points, and let's select the ones that go up here, and let's move them over a hair. Let's see. Oh, and I grabbed the wrong ones, of course. Let me try it this way. Make sure I'm grabbing the right things. That's why. So I want this one, and as you can see, I don't really get too hung up on whether I make mistakes or not, because this stuff happens. And we'll just cycle it over and go back to this window. Make change look kind of even. Alright, then I'll select these others that are now a hair off. Alright, and then we'll move them in. Okay, so now I got my points. I've got my size. What I want to do is make sure I do my freeze all transforms. I'll go ahead and freeze the model this time, clean it up a little. Control Shift A unselects everything so you can make sure nothing's selected. We'll go back to export.xsi, hit this. I want to go back to my culture center, ignore these, convert. So now I have a mesh that is now 694, which is closer to what I wanted. I've got my flares, my above aura and center. I've got my textures that are part of this, so now I have a good mesh. So now what I want to do is put this into my mod. So let me go ahead and bring up the mod. I want my Cylon race here. So let's go ahead and there's my mesh folder. I'm going to copy my culture center into there. Yes, I want to overwrite. I also need my new textures that I created. Let's put those up. Yeah, we already have textures for that because another model was already using that. Let me look at something here before I delete. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to delete those textures out. Alright. I'm going to put in my new textures. Okay. Now I've got my new mesh, which I can come in and make sure everything looks right. Alright, I'm now going to put this into my mod directory and I'll start up a quick game and test it. So this is just running through my build process, get everything out there. So now if I go look in my 3.4, go into my Cylon folder, I should now have a mesh for my new culture center. That looks right. Got my flares. Alright, so start up a game. Okay, so I've got my game running. Come in, go those random encounters, awesome stuff, but I'll just do a regular game. Alright. Okay, so here it is. I went ahead and sped up to get to the point where I built it since I didn't start it in the dev.exe. We can see that we now have the object in game. Let's see if there's my flare points that I added. Should see them at there. So go ahead and zoom out. Uh, just a quick note, if you find when you zoom out, it gets really bright. A lot of this depends on the color texture, the specular channels, the reflective, and also whether you have ship mesh highlight filter on. So if I turn that off, you see I get a more consistent but kind of drab look when I zoom out. Well, this is probably more how things would look in space, right? Here's the sun side, here's the back side. So quite a bit of difference. Turn mesh highlight filter on, and things get kind of really bright when I zoom out. Well, the values that control that are in the entity files. So if I go into the planet module entity file for the culture center, we can see this has a really high max shadow. That's what happens when you zoom out. So if I change that to a lower number, and I'll go ahead and build that out, and let me save this game here. Okay, so go ahead and save this. I'm going to end this game. Up with that changed value on the min and max shadow and kind of show the difference here real quick. Okay, so I've got this reloaded with my change on the min shadow, max shadow. Now you can see when I zoom out, it's not nearly as bad. We can see the tangent maps. Yeah, you get a little oddness on the reflective and the lighting, but it's not too bad. I may leave this the way it is for now. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the colony ship. Looks awesome, doesn't it? Okay, so let's go back to the XSI. So first off, I haven't saved yet, so let me make sure I do that. Go into my Cylon, hit my modules, planet module, Cylon, orbital, culture center. Okay, so just a quick recap. These are the steps I do when I import a model that's already been textured. I get the model imported. I project a new UV map. I use the unique UVs for the tangent map. Then I create a tangent, set the UV projection that it's using to the second UV map that I created, which you can find by walking into the object, walking into the clusters, finding the UV maps, and setting to that. You can always look at it again by opening up the tangent. I also make sure that I'm using the scene root, so anytime I just try to clean up the object after importing it. After that, we did the wiring of the object, which you can do the textures, which is option 7 to bring up this, and then we connected the normal map to ambient, the color map to diffuse, and the data map to specular. And then we added the root points, which again, I have little scripts for that. You can do it by hand. It's possible. I just choose to go this route because I find it's easier. Once those were all created, I did a Control Shift A, make sure nothing's selected. You can verify by opening your Explorer with option 8. Then I did the export.xsi, chose 3.6 version, went in, chose my model I wanted to export to, the name, hit OK, and then did the convert XSI. And that's the extent of the steps that you need to do to pull a standard model, especially for planet models, in and get it into the game. Ships are a little more complicated just because of the amount of weapon points that you have to put in, but the overall steps are very similar. You might need to be concerned about whether it's the null point is pointing right, left, front, or back. Uh, Whether you have ability points that you need to add in. Um, so just a few different things like that. I guess let's talk about the one more thing I did. The sizing. You don't have to size your model up front, but you do want to resize it at some point, and it's much better to do it inside XSI than trying to do it outside. There are a couple of resize tools that work okay, but I have found there are some glitches. Usually, I just do that when I want to make a quick resize to see how it looks. The easiest way, like I showed, is just to export it, see what the bounding radius is, and then do a multiplier of that based on what you want to do. It is possible to resize the root point too, uh, to make it go. So say you've already root pointed the model and you need to downsize it or upsize it by 10. So let's say I wanted to make this half as big. Now my root points, you can see, are still out in the original setting. Those didn't get resized with that. I can go in here and bring these in by 0.52. And as you can see, they're now sitting at the same level as the mesh object. But I'm going to revert that because I want it the way it was. Okay, so now my object is back how it was. And that's it. That's your slightly quick slash long guide to importing a pre-textured object and getting it into scenes of a Solar Empire. Thanks again. This is Zombies RS5.